going nowhere. My resolve tonight is intact. And this is what I do know. That in the spirit of Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, I'm unbought and I'm unbossed.
It is Monday, May 16th, 2022. Welcome to another edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. There you saw it, Unbossed and Unbought 2.0. This morning we speak with the former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner about the future of the Democratic Party and the future of democracy in America. But first, Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown called the massacre a unimaginable nightmare, while Erie County Sheriff John Garcia framed the onslaught as pure evil. But plainly, the deadly shooting by a white 18-year-old whose manifesto revealed his desire to cleanse the country of Black people is another example of America's lingering hate. We talk about it this morning with Dr. Benjamin Chavez, the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, James Wright of the Washington Informant, and of course, Capitol Hill reporter extraordinaire Lauren Burke of the Burke File. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Listen, before we get to Senator Turner, let's just talk about this shooting. Lauren, I'm going to start with you. Lots of hateful rhetoric there from this young man who he had racial words on his gun, let alone his manifesto.
Yeah, and we've been talking a long time. A lot of people have been bringing up that this idea of replacement theory has been mentioned on Fox News often. And this person allegedly has a manifesto where he refers to that. A lot of people connect that as a copy-paste job, really, to the New Zealand massacre a few years ago at a mosque. And this connects with, quite frankly, the third highest ranking Republican in the U.S. House, Elise Stefanik, who also decided for some reason to run Facebook ads on replacement theory. And you can already see on the right a sort of what I would call a diversion, bait and switch type of let's look over there at the shiny object, not wanting to talk about this, which is how you know that it's true, because they're already in damage mode trying to get us not to talk about replacement theory and the things that Tucker Carlson says on national television. It was just a week ago, the New York Times, Nick Confiscori did a huge piece on Tucker Carlson and white grievance and how that all connects to what we're seeing in our politics. Of course, this starts to me in 2010 with the election of Barack Obama, rise of the Tea Party, and this fear, and Roland Martin will have a book out in September called White Fear, that Black and brown people are taking over. It all connects to that. And we get this shooting, this is now the second one. Of course, we had the Mother Emanuel one in 2016, and now this one. And we've had other incidents and a rise in hate crimes in this country. We had Charlottesville, and what were they chanting in Charlottesville? Jews will not replace us. So we're back to this fear of, minority groups being in control. So that's what this incident connects to. I'm sure that we'll be talking about this in detail as the week goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Chavez, let's get a quick thought from you before we bring the senator on. This shooting, again, another example of just how far this country still has to go when it comes to race relations. And it also brings to mind something that you always say, that racism is taught.
Right. Nobody's born to racism. This young 18-year-old man, he's not a teenager. He's a man. He's 18 years old. Was nurtured and brought up, and he's had his socialization, his radicalization. But look, this is pure racism. This is pure white supremacy. And I think yesterday, as you know, Stacy, the National Newspaper Publisher, we issued a statement condemning what has happened in Buffalo, as well as all the other racist, white supremacist murders of Black people in America. In fact, you can go to blackpressusa.com or the NNPA Newswire and get that article for this week's newspapers. It's a tragedy, but Black people, the NAACP put its flag out again for lynching. This is premeditated.
Yeah.
This is not accidental. This is premeditated. This is planned. If anybody, I'm opposed to the capital punishment, but if anybody was able to get capital punishment, it would be this guy.
Yeah.
And now they're already trying to dig up, trying to say, well, he's mentally disturbed. Well, if he's mentally disturbed, then that means the former president is mentally disturbed. That Tucker Carlson is mentally disturbed. Anybody that advocates white supremacy and takes out and murders people, then they're all mentally disturbed. And it's something, but you can't let people off by claiming to be crazy. This was premeditated. This is methodical. He wrote a 180-page manifesto prior to this. He cased out the place. And so this is premeditated, cold-blooded murder. We have to call it for what it is, racist murder, and the full force of justice, both at the federal level, at the state level, and the municipal level, needs to be come down on him and all of his accomplices. Tucker Carlson is an accomplice to this murder.
James, as Dr. Chavez has pointed out there, the manifesto, but we also see, and this is pointed out again, I go back to what Doc said, we see the dog whistles of the politician. They're no longer dog whistles, right? They're just they are what they are. They call it out. We see the rhetoric. We saw how the judge, Ketanji Brown Jackson, was treated in that chamber. This is beyond just somebody acting, as Dr. Chavez said, alone. I feel as if you have to call out accomplices, as he said.
I definitely agree with that. And he didn't act alone, even though he might have done the act alone. He had an atmosphere in this country that's, well, I won't say supported him, but sort of gave him a sense of maybe this is what you should do, a faction of this. I'm very concerned about this is because this has a strong basis in history. Lauren and Dr. Chavez talked about lynchings and what has gone on in history. I remember reading when Booker T. Washington in 1901 went to the White House. He was invited by Theodore Roosevelt to have dinner at the White House. There was a Republican, well, he was a Democrat. Congressman Benjamin Tillman said, my goodness, because he did that for Booker T. Washington, we have to kill about 100 he used the N-word in order to get them in their place. This is designed to put us in our place. And that's all that these folks are trying to do. This has got to be stopped.
Well, and also, again, just referring back to what Dr. Chavez brought out, he also had he scoped it out. He looked at the zip code in Buffalo and saw that there was 78% Black folks in that zip code. It's the highest population of Blacks in any zip code in New York State, period. And we that includes obviously New York City. So he premeditated this and acted out on it. Lauren, you had some thoughts on Liz Cheney and her comments.
Yeah, so about 23 minutes ago, Liz Cheney, who is on the January 6th committee investigating the attacks on January 6, 2021, she tweeted, the House GOP leadership has enabled white nationalism, white supremacy, and anti-Semitism. History has taught us that what begins with words ends in far worse. GOP leaders must renounce and reject these views and those who hold them. Now, of course, the reason that Liz Cheney, the daughter of the former Vice President Dick Cheney from Wyoming, has to say that is that there's a number of Republicans who have said absolutely nothing, including the governor of Virginia, by the way, Glenn Youngkin, which I'm not sure what everybody's waiting for. I mean, so the House comes back tonight, and again, the third highest ranking Republican in the House has spoken the words of replacement theory. So it's going to be interesting to see how the two highest ranking Republicans in the House, Steve Scalise and Kevin McCarthy, handle that one. Because, they've been talking casually like this for years, typically referring to immigrants coming in on a southern border from Mexico, but also referring to other things. And when you see what we saw in Charlottesville, when you see what we saw at Mother Emanuel, and now you see this, and now you see a country too that has no interest in any way, shape, or form in restricting guns and the type of guns people have access to, that leads to a huge problem. And I'm talking as somebody who was the daughter of a law enforcement guy who was a gun nut who had guns all around the house. But we have this idea that, you know, an 18-year-old can have an AR-15 in the house, and oh, he's got mental issues, and nobody knows anything about that or thinks that that's some sort of an issue. So that's where we're at, and it's interesting to see Liz Cheney tweet that.
Yeah, some of the comments, let's just highlight. Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times is writing that he didn't appear mentally disturbed when he planned it out. It sounds strategic. She also writes that his behavior is the fruit of the leadership of this country. It starts at the top. They are following the direction of the country's leadership. And Walter Hill writes that the NAACP has to familiarize themselves with a Bivens suit or a 1983 undercolor of law. I'm not overly familiar with that, so I'm not sure what it has to do with it, but I'm sure Walter has made a connection there. Dr. Chavez, to put you on the spot, I won't say not to put you on the spot. I'm going to say to put you on the spot. I mean, you know a whole lot about the workings of the NAACP. What needs to happen there, or what do you anticipate happening from the NAACP standpoint?
Well, as soon as it happened, Derek Johnson, the national president and CEO of the NAACP, issued a statement on behalf of the NAACP condemning it, which he did. We support the NAACP. I'm still a life member of the NAACP. And if there's any time that we need the NAACP, it's today. In Buffalo, across the state of New York, across America, we all need to band together. All of our civil rights organizations need to band together, and we need to strategize. And we need to work with others who have been likewise the targets of this racist, white supremacist violence. I think that this is going back to the old normal. We thought that after COVID, there would be a new normal, but it seems like the country is steadily marching backwards rather than marching forward. And I want to bring up again these midterm elections. We need racism is on the ballot, or the murder of Black people is on the ballot. We have to go out and vote, and we need to vote these white supremacists out of office.
Yeah. So this this young person, young man, 18-year-old man, and I think a distinction needs to be made here. Someone pointed this out, and perhaps we can get Lauren to talk about this. Someone pointed this out, and I went back to look when describing an 18-year-old Black individual who had committed a crime. The Associated Press wrote 18-year-old Black man, and describing this young person, the Associated Press allegedly wrote 18-year-old teen, white teen. Lauren, can you talk about that a little bit? Because you and I have talked on this program about the difference between mainstream media and, of course, other media, including the Black press.
Yeah, there's a lot of negative things that we could say about Twitter, but one of the beauties of Twitter is that you can go back and look at what people said years ago in a tweet and how they referred to the exact same incident or a very similar incident in this case now. And so what people are pointing out is the difference between how Michael Brown was referred to. And just think, Michael Brown was the dead person, was the victim in that situation. Michael Brown is gone at 18 years old because he was shot by a cop in Ferguson multiple times. And then when they referred to Peyton Gendron, you know, he's an 18-year-old kid, and this guy's the perpetrator and the murderer of 10 people. And, you know, I don't know what the heck was going on in court. You know, they went to a quick, arraignment the other day with Gendron, and he pled not guilty. Excuse me, you taped this thing on Twitch and ran a live video and you're pleading not guilty. That might be a reason to think that he's insane right there. But at any rate, people are pointing out the differences, and somebody pointed out a Clyburn tweet this morning. I haven't read it, so I don't want to get too accusatory, but apparently there was some difference in the way in which Congressman Clyburn, who of course is a leader among the House Democrats, referred to this incident in comparison to another. But again, I don't know the details, so I don't want to I don't want to hit him yet.
You don't want to hit him yet, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Listen, we are anticipating bringing Senator Nina Turner on. She apparently has experienced some technical difficulties. We will get to the former senator as soon as possible, but we continue with this horrible racist shooting in Buffalo. Listen, Dr. Chavez James, let's bring you into the conversation, because again, this is a situation where then, as been said, they're saying that okay, he's going to plead not guilty because of insanity or whatever. This was premeditated. And when you think about, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a professional, but when you think about insanity, how does one write a 180-page manifesto? How does one look up zip codes to find out how many Black people live there and carry out such a racist, heinous act?
I'll be quick. Let me just say that he is diabolical. He is evil. He is insane in terms of his mentality. But this system that we have, which favors white males, I won't say they won't let him off the hook, but they'll give him every due consideration before they hand down a tough sentence. So he's going to be a product of white privilege as he goes through the court system.
Yeah, it's a privilege to have the former state senator from Ohio, Nina Turner, with us. Good morning, Senator Turner. How are you?
Good morning, my sister and my brothers. Yes, technical difficulties indeed. I'm traveling today and it's crazy. So it's good to be with you all.
Well, since we have you and we're talking about, before we get into politics, let's hear your thoughts on this. First of all, let's just give you your props. I mean, she made history in 2005 as the first African American woman to represent Ward 1 on the Cleveland City Council, and again in 2008, the first African American woman to serve as a state senator in Ohio's 25th district. We can go on and on with that, Senator Turner. But your thoughts on what we've been discussing this morning with this young murderer?
Yeah, I mean the racism, white supremacy is on full display as it always has been in this country. Every so often, more often than any of us would like, there's a reckoning in this country that we realize that as far as we have come, we have not gone far enough. And so it is vitally important that this entire country, not just Black people can't bear the burden of white supremacy. White America must bear the burden of white supremacy, and every effort to correct white supremacy in this country from policy on down must be done. And this is not just about people tweeting or people condemning. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? What kind of policies are going to be pushed to deal with this? What are we going to do about it? So while I think the symbolism of condemning and tweeting and all of that as a start is good, but what is going to be in the final analysis done to deal with something that is really the original sin stain of this country, being the stealing of our indigenous sisters and brothers' lands and, trying to enslave them over the process too. That didn't work. So they went and got our ancestors and did that for generations. And that still lingers, that the social, the mental capacity, or not capacity, but the mental imprint of white supremacy still lingers even in the 21st century. And I love the conversation you all were having, especially when my sister laid out that how some people are referring to this young man as a teenager, but when it comes to Black children, they fully grown. We know that there have been studies done, especially among law enforcement, that Black children, it's not just law enforcement, Black children are seen as older than what they really are. And Black children don't get the same mercy in this system as other folks' children do. Let's put that out on the table as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, you're talking about Lauren Burke. Lauren, let's bring Lauren in. Lauren, this senator makes some great points, and she referenced you. So
Yes, how you doing, Nina? Very
Hi,
nice.
Sister Lauren.
Yeah, I don't know where to begin, really. The Democratic Party, as you know all too well, has a problem with embracing its left flank, particularly when its left flank starts telling the truth about our politics.
That's right.
Particularly as it pertains to campaign finance reform, as it pertains to things that are beneficial to the leadership of the party, primarily. And I just wonder from you, what do you think it can be done about that? I mean, there's so many issues that had come up in your race that, of course, Jim Clyburn and others didn't want to talk about, didn't want to deal with. And there's nothing wrong with Sister Brown. It's just that she is the establishment candidate, obviously, and the candidate that will do effectively what the leadership
what she's told
wants, what she's told to do. We see that across the country. We see that pattern across the country. The progressive candidate is always getting marginalized by the party. And it's just a struggle. So can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, Sister Lauren, thank you for that. A few things. The Black community has to have a reckoning too. What are we willing to accept and not accept? This long journey of ours in this country, and we still accept crumbs from the master's table. We really do. And we're so wedded to a party that on final analysis, if we really look at what is happening to Black America and then just working class people across the country, but especially Black America, what are we truly getting materially for such loyalty? That, in other words, voting has to be transactional. We need to get something materially for our people, for our vote. And that just has not happened. And Sister Lauren, as you laid out, this party will hurt its own mama, to come after progressives, especially progressive Black women like myself. I mean, they put the full, from the president, you got the war in Ukraine at the hands of a madman, Putin. You got inflation. People can't afford gas. They can't afford food. I don't know how poor people and working poor people are even making it in this country. And middle class people barely holding on. You got all manner of stuff happening in this country. But they, from the president on down to the super PACs, DMFI, Democratic Majority for Israel, AIPAC, all of them folks with all this stuff happening was able to dip themselves into a 11 congressional district race that a Democrat was going to win. But Sister Lauren, here's the point. The matter was which type of Democrat was going to win. I have allies who navigate those circles who were told that I am not the right type of Democrat. You know why? Because I hail from the Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm school of being a Democrat, unbought and unbossed. In other words, I'm going to stand up for the best interest of the people that I serve from all walks of life. That is what I am going to do. And the city of Cleveland, by way of example, is the poorest city of its size in the entire United States of America. And what was my crime? Standing up saying that we deserve universal health care in this country? That babies, y'all let the child tax credit expire, but you sending billions of dollars over there to the Ukraine? Now look, send that money, help those folks, or millions, hundreds of millions. Send the money over there, help them.
Billions,
but
you
for
got
every
it right.
billions. For every dollar you spend over there, let's spend that same dollar over here domestically, because there's a war going on in this country. It's called poverty. It's called I can't afford my gas. I can't afford my food. I can't afford to go to the doctor. They press secretary who's leaving, right, when asked about the shortage, by way of example, Sister Brother, I know I'm jumping because it's turning hot this morning, but I'm just making a finer point here. When asked what should parents do about the shortage of formula and baby food, this woman said, go talk to your doctor. Well, what she forgot to recognize is that many folks, that talking to a doctor is a luxury in the United States of America. Now, it doesn't have to be that way, but it is that way. So for Black folks and then other working folks, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was forming that poor people's movement that Dr. William Barber has cemented in the 21st century, we need that kind of coalition of Black people, of white people, of brown people, of Asian people, people from all identities to come together and say enough is enough and we're not going to continue to take it anymore, and we must deal with both class and caste in this country. In other words, there are things that we can unite with our other sisters and brothers from all walks of life, and that is the hell that poor people are catching. But then there's an extra special level to hell that Black folks are catching. And both Dr. King and Minister Malcolm X talked about the white liberal. But what we must talk about, or the white moderate, white liberal, we must talk about as a community is the Black moderate, that they are standing in the way of Black progress in the United States of America. I said it. Hello, somebody.
Well, it sounds like we need to bring Dr. Chavez into the conversation as well, Doc.
Well, vintage Nina Turner, vintage freedom fighter Nina Turner. Sister, we know that whether you won that election or not, you're going to continue to be a freedom fighter for Black people. And we admire you, your courage and your voice. And that's why we have the Black press. And I'm so thankful we have you on this morning. You were asking, well, what are we going to do? One of the things that we need to do, not all, but one of the things we need to do, our voting pattern is even in Ohio, it was in some places, it was still low voter turnout. We got to vote the right people into office and vote the wrong people out of office. We got to hold people accountable. And this is the midterm elections. If you think that what's going on now is bad, you let these white supremacists take over everything in this midterm election, particularly at the state level, state legislative level, as well as in some of these congressional districts. It's going to be an awful time. You know, I remember when Reagan was first elected in 1980, everybody said, oh my God, how would you let this happen? But it was vote low to turnout. And I think that voting is not the cure-all, but it is something that we need to do from a grassroots perspective. And you're right, the masses have a right to choose their leadership, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. And I support Reverend William Barber. We have a Poor People's Mobilization next month in Washington, D.C., where these issues will be addressed with the kind of coalitions, progressive coalitions. And you're right, almost progressive now has become a negative turn, even among Black people. Why? So we got to keep pushing and keep struggling and keep fighting for freedom at all levels.
Well, and before we before we get to James, I know James has a question for you, Senator, but let me ask you two things. One, well, I'll put them all together. Your vision or what you see as the future of both the Democratic Party and democracy in this country.
Thank you for that, because that ties into what Dr. Chavez just said. First of all, we got to give people a reason to vote. Those of us who have been groomed to vote, like Big Mama said, go vote, and you've been voting ever since. That is not the reality for everybody. And so we got to give people, you know, one of my favorite singing groups, In Vogue, had a song, giving them something he can feel. You know, I want to replace him with them being the people, giving them something they can feel so that they can know the love is real. That means that the Democratic Party has an opportunity to change material conditions, cancel student debt. The president can do that with the stroke of a pen. And we know that Black women hold the largest amount of student debt in the United States of America. I'm just using this as an example. That would have a class and a caste component. Let's have universal health care. You mean in the face of pandemic, we still debating whether or not people deserve to have health care in this country? We can go on and on. George Floyd Act was not passed. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, not passed. All of these excuses, but in a bipartisan way, they can increase the Pentagon budget and they can send billions of dollars over to the Ukraine. Now, be clear, Sister Turner not saying don't help those folks. I want those folks to be helped. But again, for every dollar that we spend over there, let's go ahead and spend that dollar over here. So we have to change material conditions to motivate people to come out to vote. So Dr. Chavez is right about more people have to vote. State legislatures is another going on something else that Dr. Chavez said. You know, serving in that Senate where my Republican colleagues had super majorities. And when you have that kind of super majority across the country, we're losing lots of ground in state legislatures all across this country. So there needs to be a bigger investment into electing folks, not just to the shiny object known as the Congress or the presidency, but making sure that we got freedom fighting folks elected on state levels of government as well to move forward. And then my last point, don't nobody get more progressive than Black folks. There is not a term, might not be the love language of Black people, but hear out my point. It don't get more progressive or more going against the status quo than fighting for your very freedom, your very livelihood, and that of your progeny. That is what Black folks have done historically in the United States of America. In the 21st century, I believe somewhat we have lost our way. We have never been a people of the status quo in totality, because if we were, we wouldn't be free. I hope folks are following me. You had to go against the status quo to fight against slavery. You had to go against the status quo to fight for civil rights, against redlining, to make Black people equal in this country. You had to be. So why is it in the 21st century that Black people are in this lull where we fall so in love with folks that we don't make a demand? So we have got to start making demands. And when Black people make demands, everybody, my grandmother used to say, lottie-dottie and everybody benefits. That is historic in this country, that when Black people move, the nation moves.
Well, Walter Hill says real power is local. City and state politicians whom are compassionate about Black and brown people. James, I throw it to you right quick. I know we're going over time this morning, so go ahead, James.
I'll be very straightforward. Senator Turner, could you talk about the success of the progressive movement? Here's what I mean. 10 years ago, if you had talked about canceling student debt, people would have looked at you like you were crazy. And 10 years ago, we were in this midst of debating Obamacare, or it was being implemented. The idea of Medicare for all would have been considered ridiculous. It was considered ridiculous. Now it's mainstream. Many progressive ideas are now mainstream. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, that's right, James, that this movement that was ignited, certainly the 21st century version of it, was ignited in the latter part of 2015 when Senator Bernie Sanders ran for office. That's irrefutable, that he talked to this nation about the things that you deserve, and he awakened the sleeping giants and the imagination. So yes, you are absolutely right. The issues that the progressive movement, and although not perfect, right, is fighting for are the things that are necessary. It is necessary for people to be able to afford their prescription drugs. That wouldn't have been talked about. It is necessary for us to deal with fossil fuel and the plight of Mother Earth, or our very survival as human beings on this earth. It is necessary to talk about people having universal health care. And you know what? This is not the first time. There's nothing new under the sun, said King Solomon. In the 1940s, President FDR, as we, people who study history recognize, that he was talking about a second Bill of Rights. And that Bill of Rights is what we call the Economic Bill of Rights. And in that Economic Bill of Rights was health care, guaranteed jobs, education, you name it. That was in the 40s. And the White House conducted a study that showed very clearly that the overwhelming, I think it was over 80% of Americans as a whole, believed in the agenda that President FDR was pushing before he died. These things are not new. One of the greatest unionists of our time, Asa Philip Randolph, created with 150 other people. And Dr. Chavez, you may remember this. I mean, these people signed it. He put out I think he called it the people's budget, or a budget for working class people, something like that. But 150 leaders across the country signed on to this. And it was about the abolition of poverty, farming parity, health care, jobs for people who can't work, and on and on. So my major message is that, James, that we must suspend our disbelief as a Black people and as a working class, and building that kind of coalition that Dr. King was trying to build, that people like Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm was trying to build, that broad coalition of working class people all across this country, not losing sight of race now. Can't lose sight of anti-Blackness. We can't lose sight of that, and racism and white supremacy, but building the type of powerful coalition that can overcome the owner donors in this country, that far too many politicians answer to their owner donors, and they don't answer to the people, that the system must be fixed. And we got to continue to do things like what we're doing this morning. I want to direct people to an article that was in Common Dreams, and it's called The 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights. And it was penned by Alan Minsky, who's the executive director of PDA, Progressive Democrats of America, and also Professor Emeritus Dr. Harvey Kaye, who's an expert on FDR. I'm telling you, the thing is beautiful. We can lift that up as a people, both Black people and working class people. And let's do a new thing. Let's make some demands. There must be consequences for not delivering for the people. And lastly, sisters and brothers, I will say what happened to me and what's happening to other Black women, in particular, women of color who are running. You got Sister Summer Lee on the ballot. You got a young sister, Summer Lee is a young sister. You got a young sister, Alum is her last name, in North Carolina. If you look across the country, the very forces that came up against me are bumping up against those women too. They come very hard and almost like a type of anti-Blackness violence, political violence against Black progressive women and other progressives of color. And we must stand up and say, we are not going to accept that the people, no matter if people support somebody else, see, I'm not talking about that. But when you have a cryptocurrency billionaire dipping into the 11th congressional district, ain't never been there before, does not care that Cleveland is the poorest city of its size. When you have organizations like DMFI and APAC dip into communities and they decide by the power of money who the leaders are going to be, we have a problem that is bigger than the 11th congressional district. This problem, this conundrum is a problem of our democracy. So just as we're talking about white supremacy, we also have to talk about the influence of big money to decide. No longer are elections decided at the ballot box, they decided in boardrooms. And that will hurt Black people in particular, but all working class people in general. We cannot allow it. No matter who you support, we can't allow it.
Well, Senator Nina Turner, it's been a privilege having you on this morning. We hope to have you back again in the not too distant future. Actually, that you hang on, our producer would like to say goodbye to you before you leave. But just on a note, Dr. Chavez, aspiring content creators, journalists, and communications experts can find themselves at the forefront of change by covering the exciting and continued transformation from gas to electric vehicles during the Chevrolet National Newspaper Publicists Association's expanded Discover the Unexpected Fellowship 2022 Summer Scholarships. Tonight, 11:59 p.m. is the deadline to apply. The program offers more students from HBCUs internships to explore various roles and develop skills as change agents in their communities. It's in its 6th year now, and the program will provide 10 students from HBCUs with a 10-week summer internship, and each fellow will receive $10,000 scholarship and a $5,000 stipend. And also they will get to drive the 2022 Bolt EV Access during their internship. So to apply. It's the deadline, y'all. nnpa.org/ChevyDTU to register. Thanks for joining. Let it be known. We will see you tomorrow.